Welcome back to Iron Rage, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo, and I'm here with the Rager of Ragers, the man himself, John Romano. Welcome, man.
What's up, Dave? Did you notice?
We're here to talk about insulin insanity. I call it insulin insanity because the bodybuilding world is just lost its mind with regard to insulin. They don't understand what it is. People think it's this magical muscle-building hormone, and it's being used irresponsibly. And I've had it up to here, John, with the insulin madness out there, because someone's going to kill themselves with it. It's a shame. You know, I don't like to see people damage themselves, but I get some crazy. I got a question the other day. Hey, Dave, I want to take insulin, but I'm following a low-carb diet because I want to stay lean. How do I do it? I mean. Really? Low carb diet? You're going to take insulin to lower your blood sugar more? I don't get it. I don't understand. But I think we should take a step back first and kind of go over where insulin usage in bodybuilding came from, because back in the 90s, early 90s, I know I was experimenting with it. I had taken growth hormone, and I found that I was having trouble gaining weight, and I couldn't understand why. I was eating a ton of calories. I was taking, the right anabolics. I was taking, probably 3-4 IUs of GH, and I wasn't growing. And I started doing some reading, and I realized that, growth hormone makes you insulin resistant, meaning your insulin can't get to the receptors and do what it does. And what does insulin do? It's a transport hormone. It drives nutrients into the muscle cells. If the nutrients can't get into the muscle cells, you can't synthesize new muscle, okay? So I started experimenting, and I remember the first shot of insulin I took, I went out to the pharmacy and I bought a bottle of Humulin R, which obviously you can do legally in New York. And right. I didn't know how much to take. I didn't know who to ask. So I said, I'll just take 40 units of the stuff. And I found out very rapidly that 40 units was a lot of insulin. And for the next 12 hours, I was eating nonstop to get my blood sugars back up, because they kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And then I did some more research, and I talked to a diabetic person, and I realized that probably, more like 8 to 10 IUs was a good dosage. And then I met Milos Sarshev and I went to Dubai in 1996, and we sat down and we had like an insulin summit of sorts, where we discussed all our findings about using insulin, and we kind of perfected the techniques. Milos went in one direction, I kind of went in another direction. But I know that you, growing up there and living in California and Venice, living with Dan Duchesne, I know Duchesne was experimenting with insulin early 90s as well.
Well, it was from Tim Belknap, who we had on Heavy Muscle Radio a while back.
Yeah, he was a type 1 diabetic.
He was a type 1 diabetic, and he was the only diabetic bodybuilder that we knew, and he figured out how to manipulate insulin to enhance his physique tremendously. I mean, he was a national champion.
Well, the difference was, though, that he was a type 1 diabetic. He needed the insulin as well.
Right. Right, but he figured out how to manipulate it, and he admits it. He said, that's how I got big, was manipulating my insulin. And Duchesne was talking to him about it, and we tried a few experiments, and we had to figure out which analog to use and how fast it worked, and was a fast-acting one better than a short one, or a medium one, or a mixture. And there was a lot of trial and error, a couple of close calls passing out, and I think at one point I remember Milos showing Dan a protocol, I guess the one you worked on with him, and for him to look it over, and Dan, kind of gave it a thumbs up. I remember that very, very vividly. But it's one of those things, man. It's a necessary tool, I believe, in some aspects of bodybuilding, but it's definitely not for everybody.
Well, not everyone needs insulin. That's the problem. It's not one of these like everyone needs growth hormone to make better gains, because insulin is not a muscle-building hormone. You pointed that when we were talking earlier. It's a transport hormone. So if you have enough transport already into your muscle cells with your natural insulin, taking more insulin is not better. It's worse, because insulin is a fat storage hormone. So if you take too much insulin, you store fat. If you take insulin before you go to the gym, which a lot of these knuckleheads are doing nowadays, guess what happens? You get low blood sugar in the gym and you feel like crap. And if you take too much, you pass out in the gym, which is also not very smart, especially when you got weights over your face, okay, on a bench press, or you're under a bar squatting and you lose consciousness. Not the best position to be in. I'm disturbed about is that there are people out there who think that insulin is like taking a shot of testosterone. Oh yeah, you just take insulin before the gym because you're gonna grow in the gym. Chris Aceto made one of the wisest statements I think ever when we were discussing this once on Heavy Muscle Radio. He said that the carbs that are in your muscles, okay, when you're training at the gym, are the carbs that were put there 2 days before, not 20 minutes before you got to the gym. And I thought that was a very, very wise statement, because taking an insulin shot before you go to the gym is not going to do anything for you except drop your blood sugar. And if you are not a type 1 diabetic, you already are producing insulin naturally.
Right.
So why would you imprecisely take an insulin shot before you go to the gym when you can just take some kind of a carb drink before you go to the gym, and your body knows exactly how much insulin to release to absorb those carbs?
That's right.
To me,
it's bro science. It's freaking bro science. I got these guys here in Mexico in the gym. They think they're little skinny guys, and they think they need to take everything. They're taking growth hormone and insulin and testosterone and Winstrol and Masterone, and they're this big, huge cocktail of drugs that conflict with each other.
Right.
They just have no idea what they're doing, but it's a shotgun effect because, they heard, Ronnie Coleman used insulin, or Kai Green used insulin, or Jay Cutler did, or whomever. But what they don't realize is you could walk around with an IV bag of Humalog, dripping into your vein with a cotton candy machine following you, and you would never amass the kind of muscle that these guys do because they're genetic freaks. And this notion that you can compensate for bad genetics with more drugs.
Right. Yeah.
It's just retarded.
Now when people ask me what the protocol is for insulin, first of all, I ask them, what drugs are you taking that you think you need to take insulin? Because if you're a normal person, meaning you produce insulin from your pancreas and your blood sugars are normal, okay, and you're not taking any growth hormone, you don't need insulin. If you take insulin, you will more than likely get fat from it, okay, or at least get bloated from it, okay? That's not muscle gains. Now, if you're a bodybuilder who takes growth hormone, okay, on a regular basis, and you take a lot of it, you might be making yourself insulin resistant if you don't produce a lot of insulin to begin with. Now, how would you know that? Well, guys who stay lean, relatively lean on a regular basis, tend to not produce a lot of insulin. Like someone like myself, I could eat whatever I want. I don't get fat because I don't overproduce insulin. People who get fat easily, who put muscle on easily, those guys usually oversecrete insulin.
Right. You
put insulin into a body like that, you're going to make them a fat mess. Okay, but you get a person who doesn't produce a lot of insulin, you put them on GH, make them more insulin, you make them insulin resistant. Now they're not absorbing their food, like the story I told you earlier about what I was when I was, coming up. Now they're not growing. You put insulin into that type of a person, okay, and all of a sudden they start growing. Now, what's the right way to do it? That's the key.
Right.
From my experimentation and from what I learned, okay, I found that Humulin R, which is a regular insulin, it's fast-acting but not super fast-acting, works better than Humalog or Apidra, which are super fast-acting insulins. Those super fast-acting insulins are for people who have no insulin production in their body, to get the blood sugar down quickly. But if you have normal insulin production in your body, you're already going to produce something from the food you're eating. So you don't need super fast-acting insulin. You want something that has a slower reaction time. Humulin R will peak initially, and it will only dump half of what you take into it. So if you took 10 IUs, 5 IUs would unload right away, and then 2 or 3 hours later, you get another peak of the other 5 IUs. That's a better way to go. Less chance of getting low blood sugars, more duration effect of the insulin. So I usually recommend people take 8 to 10 IUs in the morning with the breakfast, and then 5 to 6 hours later, when the Humulin R would wear off, do another 6 to 8 IUs. And always, obviously, with food. And the way you figure out how much food you want is usually it's usually 10 grams of carbs per 1 insulin unit, but that's super fast-acting insulins. With the regular insulins, you could do half that much. So like 5 or 6 grams of carbs per 1 insulin unit. So if you're taking 10 IUs of Humulin R, you could eat, probably 50 or 60 grams of carbs, and that will satisfy the first peak. And then your next meal, 2 hours later, you have another 50 or 60 grams of carbs, and that'll satisfy the second peak. And you do that for both insulin shots. And obviously, you're eating your protein with that as well. Another crazy notion I get from people is that you can't take fat in when you're taking insulin, okay? Or you're going to get fat from that. And that's just not true. And you know what? I'm going to take the responsibility for this because I made the incorrect statement about 15 years ago on some, like one of these Q&As I did online, that you shouldn't take insulin and eat fat at the same time. So I'm the responsible party for making that rumor circulate. But I've been trying to undo that damage for years and years and years, and it's still not working. You could eat fat with carbs. Because remember, insulin drives carbs into the muscle cell,
right,
and into the fat cell. It doesn't drive fat. So insulin does not store fat as fat. It stores carbs as fat. So that's another misnotion. Now, you and I have seen some crazy insulin episodes over the years. What would you say was the nuttiest thing that you saw anyone do with insulin and have repercussion-wise from it?
Oh, the nuttiest one was the guy who was I guess took, I don't know how many units before he trained. Well, you know, I sort of have to go back because the protocol that I got from Milos is completely different. He's got you doing, that protocol has 10 units before you work out, 10 units after you work out, but you eat a meal with, you know, carbs and protein and fat first. 45 minutes later, you make a shake with 10 grams of you know, carbs, 10 grams of whey protein, 10, you know, 5 grams of glutamine, a bunch of other crap, and you drink that. They make another one of those, and you sip it while you're training, and then you take 10 units after you train. You take another shake like that, plus about a half hour later, a meal that's got, you know, a bunch of carbs in it.
Yeah, Milos with his insulin. Milos with the insulin, right? That was Blackman always saying.
But that's the protocol I've been using down here, and it seems to work pretty well. You know, I mean, that's a very cursory glance at it. It's obviously a lot more specific than that. But
what Milos did was Milos said, let me make something so complicated that people feel they have to use all these different, you know, pre-workouts, post-workouts, intra-workouts, because he was making his own products that he wanted to sell. I mean, there's no reason to be shotgunning carbs while you're training. It's unnecessary. And it's unnecessary to be playing with blood sugars while you're training, okay? Because the thing that you want most as you work out is stability in your blood sugar. And taking insulin right before you train is going to create instability in your blood sugar, which is going to affect your workouts. People have this notion because they're taking a shot before they go into the gym, and because it's a fast-acting shot, that, ooh, I feel better, I'm pumped in the gym. I don't buy into that bullshit. I think it's crap. I used to take a pre-workout shake. I was more pumped. My muscles felt like they were going to explode, and I never took a single insulin shot before I went to the gym. So I don't, you know, if you have normal producing insulin in your body, you don't need the insulin shot before you go to the gym. It's only going to act as a dangerous, I guess you could say, instigator of trouble.
To that point, this guy takes his 10-unit insulin shot in the locker room and doesn't drink the shake and didn't have the meal before. He figured he was going to wait. So he gets under. I have a vertical leg press. You ever seen one of those?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have one of 3 in the entire country.
Yeah, I think Ron Norman had the other one until he tore both quads on it. Yeah.
Yes, that's the same one. Well, this guy almost did the same thing. He gets under the thing, and after 3 or 4 sets, he's got the thing all loaded up. Now he's going to do a heavy set, and he's under. He's got his feet up, and he's adjusting, and he's pushing, and he's doing this whole, like he's going to break an Olympic record kind of lift preparation. And he straightens his legs out, he unracks the weights, unlocks his knees, and passes out. The weight comes crashing down onto the stops, and he's like spread eagle underneath it like that. The stops are set too low, and we go running over there, to freaking grab him to get him out of there, and we couldn't. He was stuck, with his legs like this, and he was unconscious. So, and the ambulance came to take him away.
They didn't give him any sugar or something like that to wake him up?
They did. When we finally figured out what they did, the ambulance drivers gave him some sugar cubes, and then they put him on an IV when they got him to the hospital. But that guy was going. You can die. Yeah, you can go into a coma and die by doing that.
Yeah, insulin is not the kind of hormone that you want to use irresponsibly. A lot of people, there's a lot of stuff you can do irresponsibly and get away with it. Insulin's not one of those things. I had a client, I'm not going to mention his name, this was years ago, who I had on a ketogenic diet, no carb diet, and I didn't know this. Unbeknownst to me, he was taking like 10 IUs of insulin 3 times a day.
And 3 times a day?
Yes, listen to this. And he was like an opiate guy, Percocet popper. So, he wasn't, when you take Percocets and stuff like that, you don't feel the low blood sugars. You probably remember back in the days when you took the Nubain, Remember, if you were hungry, you took Nubain shot, you didn't even feel hungry anymore. It would like
right.
you wouldn't feel low blood sugar. Now, I was trying to figure out how he didn't die, and he actually got in shape. The guy, I don't know how he did it. I was trying to figure out. Obviously, he wouldn't feel the low blood sugars because he was so narcoticed out. But what happens in the body is the body has what's called counter-regulatory hormones. These hormones are designed to raise blood sugar when blood sugar gets too low. The two hormones I'm speaking of is cortisol, okay, which is something you don't want in your body, obviously, because it's catabolic and it breaks down muscle tissue. It takes those amino acids, turns them into glucose to raise blood sugar. The other counter-regulatory hormone is produced by your pancreas. Also, it's called glucagon. And glucagon will mobilize, glycogen from the muscle and the liver cells and will raise blood sugar too. So he must have had some great counter-regulatory hormones that were cranking out, cortisol and glucagon, and that's the only reason he didn't die, because anyone else would have been dead, taking 30 IUs of insulin a day on a no-carb diet. Did we lose John? Oh, there he is.
It's just insanity. 30 units in one day?
Yes. No-carb diet. Zero.
The guy weighed, what, 140 pounds soaking away?
He was 176.
He was a fat, one of the two.
He was 176.
Yeah, little guy, exactly.
Yeah.
I get that here. You got to see this. You got to come down here sometime. You will crack up. You see these guys in the gym. First of all, every one of them looks gay. They're the most metrosexual, population of people I've ever seen in my entire life. I probably got 12 man buns in here at any given time of the day. All right, and with a beard and a man bun. That's like the new cool thing. So and they got their bag around their shoulder, and they're like little, but they will do every single drug, every one of them all together.
Really?
And insulin is just another one. And I get probably one every other month passes out in here.
Look, the take-home message here, guys, and I want you to listen, is insulin is no joke. You don't need insulin, okay? Only a very small population of people will benefit bodybuilding-wise from taking insulin. If insulin was the magic hormone that everyone thinks it was, there would be 1 million people out there that are huge. We know, John and I, a lot of people who take insulin, they don't even look like they work out. So all insulin will do in most people is make you fat. If you want to be fat, take insulin. If you want to risk, killing yourself, take insulin. But I'm telling you, if I thought it would work and I thought it was this special hormone, I would tell you everyone needs to take it. But unless you have a super fast metabolism and you're taking high amounts of GH, insulin is going to do nothing for you but cause problems. And on that note, we are out of time for another episode of Iron Rage with Dave Palumbo and the raging man himself, John Romano. Until next time, have a good day.